Welcome. We are coming back to the discussion of various trading blocks all over the world. We have already started the discussion regarding trading blocks, the requirement of trading blocks, economic integration surrounding various trading blocks, necessity of such organizations in different regions of the world. Some of these requirements are classified as economics, some of them are classified as purely financial. The trading blocks of the world, when you talk about trading blocks, the first thing that comes into mind is the economic cooperation that is required to be started, that is required to be started and implemented by various countries so that they take a giant step towards the growth of the resources available with these countries. Some of these countries might be very large in size, some of them might be very small, but overall the factor endowment, the endowment of resources of these companies, they are critical for various factors and for outgrowing each of these factors independently. These trading blocks is either a large free trade zone or a near free trade zone formed by either tax consideration or tariff and trade agreements. Typically, there should be a trade pact which defines such a trade body, specifying the formal adjudication process. This process may include even a more democratic and participative system. Such a system was in place at the European Union, which we have already discussed. Such major trade blocs include European Union, EU, Nafta, North American Free Trade Agreement, Opaque, Organization of Petrol Exporting Countries, Asean, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and Sac, South Asian Association of Regional Cooperation. So these are primarily the larger trading blocs that exist all over the world at this point of time, and they are more or less successful. Nafta is highly successful, European Union is highly influential, and it controls almost one-fourth of world's trade. It's even bigger in terms of GDP than Nafta and USA. The trading blocs are basically created because of the implementation and application of theory of comparative advantage. Countries should specialize in producing those goods in which they enjoy comparatively higher advantage. In comparison, another country should specialize in the productivity, in increasing the production activity of another commodity in which it has more competitive advantage than the first one. So even if one country is specializing in two commodities, it actually enjoys comparatively more advantage in only one and not the two. As countries become more and more specialized, it becomes necessary to trade because of the specialization, because of the comparative advantage they enjoy over a period of time, they must trade their surplus with other countries which are trade deficit. India is one of the countries which is trade surplus in some of the commodities like jewelry production, like uh, trading in handicraft goods, textile commodities, softwares. But in some of other commodities, it is still deficient in production of electricity, in production of oil and natural resources. We are still dependent upon other countries. Due to these factors, as nations become more specialized, they also become increasingly more dependent on their trading partners. They require the commodity from that. I will give you a recent incident that Iran is one of the largest producer of oil resources all over the world. But Iran has some serious differences over the usage and development of nuclear reactors, nuclear energy, and even nuclear warheads. It has serious problems with Israel and United States of America. So as all over the world, the larger countries, the developed nations are of the opinion that Iran is producing difficult and perhaps dangerous warheads which can create large amount of conflict in that region. They're trying to subdue Iran and pressurizing it to open its nuclear installations, places where nuclear weapons are supposed to be made, feared to be made, to inspection on the part of International Atomic Commission. But Iran is deferring these things again and again. Thereby speculation is rife in world political circle that Iran is seriously nearer to producing a technology capable of being converted into a nuclear warhead. What does that mean? It is capable of being creating and employing and deploying atomic missile. So it created problem for all over the world, specifically for the countries that are at loggerheads with Iran, because Iran is more or less a conservative country, but very stubborn. So US and its allies passed a resolution in the United Nations to ban import of Iranian oils. India has very cordial relation with both USA and Iran. Iran is one country from where India is constantly purchasing oil resources for last 20-30 odd years. So all this economic community including United States called upon India to stay away from exporting oil from Iran, which means India should import oil from somebody else and not Iran. But because Iran is specialized in that trade and India is deficient in the oil resources, India thought if we stop at the consequent of a time, that if at this point of time without an interruption period in between we stop procuring oil from Iran, it will create shortage of oil resources in India for some period of time. So because of that, market demand of oil will go up and consequently the prices are going to move up. So as a result, inflationary pressure will work in India and Indian economy will run tremendous problem, tremendous pressure. So because of that, India declined to stop the import of oil from Iran. So there is a simmering tension between India and USA for the time being. There is a talk of US imposing some kind of sanctions on Indian companies, but they stopped sort of because India is a large country. It specializes in lots of productive activities, of which Washington is severely dependent, and in India's economic clout. India is the sixth largest purchasing power economy in terms of purchasing power parity. It's the almost fifth or sixth largest in terms of GDP. So India is not a small country which can be pressurized. So these trade blocs act as an intergovernmental association that manage and promote trading activities for specific regions of the world. So trading blocs have become necessary. We have already discussed detail about European Union. Today we are going to discuss about Nafta, Asean, Opaque and Sac. The North American Free Trade Area, popularly known as Nafta, is the trade bloc of North America created by countries like Canada, Mexico and United States. It came into effect in the year 94, January 1, 94. The agreement was initially pursued by conservative governments in the United States. Canada supportive of free trade, led by Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney and then US President George H.W. Bush, the father of George W. Bush, and Mexican President Carlos Salinas de Gortari. The three-nation NAFTA was signed on 17 December 1992, pending its ratification by the legislature of three countries, and the legislature passed these units in 93, thereby paving the way for implementation in 1st January 94. The Nafta Secretariat comprised a Canadian section, Mexican section, and United Nations section. It is responsible for administration of dispute settlement regarding NAFTA agreements between all the three countries. The objective of the NAFTA agreement was as follows. It wanted to eliminate barriers to trade and facilitate cross-border movement of goods and services between all the three large territories. United States is huge, Mexico is not small, Canada is also a large country. Canada's area is almost 2.5 times that of India. It also wanted to promote conditions of fair competition in the free trade area. They abolished the tariff system. They abolished any quota, any kind of protectionism in that area. This increased the substantial amount, the investment opportunity in the territories of the three countries. It also was instrumental in providing adequate and effective protection and implementation of intellectual property rights in all these three countries. It also wanted to create effective procedures for implementation and application of this agreement and for its joint commissioning, administration and resolution of disputes. The parties agreed upon all these important documents, important points, important rules, thereby paving the way for the largest free trade area in the world. Born in January 94, three members, US, United States, Canada and Mexico. It is world's largest free trade area. Under NAFTA, all non-tariff barriers of agriculture was eliminated immediately. Many tariffs are being eliminated over a period of 5 to 15 years from 1994 till 2009. Two-way trade between US and Mexico increased by more than 55%. Two-way trade between Canada and USA increased by 50%. It reached 16.3 billion from almost 11 point some billion from within the period of 94 till 2003. NAFTA has become a roaring success. We are now coming to Asean, which is nearer to India, and although it consisted of small countries, it was also a roaring success, not in the sense of NAFTA, but still it's much more successful than Sac. Established in 1967 with five founding members, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore and Thailand. It was later joined by Brunei, Myanmar and Vietnam. ASEAN created a free trade area which is known as AFTA, ASEAN Free Trade Area. ASEAN played beyond trade a political role visible by formation of ASEAN Regional Forum, of which China, India and USA are members. ASEAN as a trade bloc, as a trade area, has been a huge success leading to prosperity and elimination of poverty in countries like smaller countries like Philippines, which is one of the founding members. The ASEAN cooperation extended to agriculture and rural development, health and population activities, women, youth and children, environment and forestry, science and technology, human resource development, transportation, communication technology, biotechnology, IPR, tourism and energy. The members has become larger by the day. It has been included, it has been boosted by the influence of Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam and Brunei. Now we are coming to the more talked about but very less successful SARC, which is closer to heart and closer to home. The South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation was established when its charter was formally adopted in December 1985 by the heads of state of India, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. SARC was inclined and desired to provide a platform for the peoples of South Asia to work together with a spirit of friendship, trust and understandingness. They wanted themselves to work in a very cooperative and accelerated manner. It's large in size. SARC constitutes 1.5 billion people, 25% of world's population. But it has only 2% of world's GNP in the year 2005. SARC has been a sheer failure because of conflicts between member countries. The total external trade of the region by the year 2005 was less than that of 1% of world exports and 1.5% of world's imports. The reason behind this is disputes between member countries like India and Pakistan. Still, it's not denying the fact that it has been a roaring partial success. They started SAFTA, the South Asian Preferential Trading Agreement, which has come into force in 1995. But the problem was a free trade area which should have been created could not be created because of objections from all of these countries. To promote the welfare of people of South Asia was the primary objective of SARC. Economic growth, social progress, development of culture, and to provide impetus, opportunity to all the population of this area is actually the objective of SARC. It wanted to promote a sense of brotherhood, collective self-reliance among member countries. It wanted to contribute to mutual trust, understanding and appreciation of each other's problems. But behind these requirements and long-term goals, such cooperation shall not be able to substitute for bilateral and multilateral cooperation. Such cooperation shall not be inconsistent with bilateral and multilateral obligations because apart from being members of SARC, these are independent and sovereign countries. India as a country has its own sovereign requirements. It's a large country with large amount of population. It needs to sustain it with largest development taking place. GDP growth is required to be around 10%, which can be enough, still not enough I think, to sustain the increase in population. The area of cooperation was primarily in agriculture and rural development, health and population, environment and forestry, science and technology, transportation, human resource development. Like all these area of cooperation looks like those areas of cooperation which was originally proclaimed to be the objectives of Asean. Recently, a high-level working group was established to strengthen cooperation in the field of information and technology, biotechnology, tourism, energy, and intellectual property rights. In the year 2007, although Afghanistan wanted to be a member of SAC from the year 2003. It was actually given its rightful place in the year 2007 when the SAC meeting took place in Bangladesh, capital Dhaka. The Sac Secretariat was established in Nepalese capital Kathmandu in 1987. The primary role of this secretariat is to coordinate and monitor the implementation of SAC activities. It should serve as a channel of communication between SAC members. This secretariat has also been utilized as a cooperative area where various member countries can go to international bodies to represent the SAC as a member and as individual countries. The SAC Secretariat comprises of Secretary General, 7 directors, and General Services staff. The details of its officials and working divisions is responsible primarily for areas of work given to them by the Secretary General. SAC has established several centers all across all the countries. SAC Agricultural Information Sector was established in Dhaka. SAC Meteorological Research Center was also established in Dhaka. SAC Tuberculosis Center was established in Kathmandu. SAC Documentation Center in New Delhi. SAC Human Resource Center in Islamabad, Pakistan. SAC Coastal Zone Management Center in Maldives. SAC Information Center in Nepal. SAC Energy Center in Pakistan. And SAC Disaster Management Center in India, again in New Delhi. So these are established centers by the organization of SAC to coordinate each of the required activities which are taken as objectives of SAC. So these agencies, these centers has been given the primary activity of coordinating and furthering workings related to these fields in their respective area. Now we are coming to the last of the trading blocks, Opaque. It's a small organization in comparison to others, but it's not the least important. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries is a permanent intergovernmental organization created at Baghdad Conference in the year 1960. The OPEC must coordinate their oil production objectives in order to help stabilize the oil market in the world and help oil producers achieve a reasonable rate of return on their investments. This policy is also designed to ensure that oil consumers continue to receive stable supplies of oil. So OPEC was primarily established to look after the goals of getting a reasonable rate of return for its members and providing the world over the consumers with stable and equitable amount of oil supply, because OPEC countries almost control 60% of world's oil supply. The OPEC Fund for International Development is a multilateral development financial institution. It was established in 1976 by the member countries, and this was basically established to give out loans to the member countries and non-members also in case that is required for development of various infrastructural institutions all over the place. OPEC has also a center which serves as its secretariat. The secretariat carries out the executive function of the organization in accordance with the provisions of OPEC statute, are under the direction from the Board of Governors, which were duly appointed by respective member governments. OPEC members, there are consequently only 12 members of OPEC. They all are situated in various regions of the world: Algeria, Angola, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Libya, Nigeria, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE and Venezuela. It's a permanent organization established in 1960. Its headquarters is Vienna, Austria. Its objective is to coordinate and unify petroleum policies among the member countries to secure free and fair and a stable price for petroleum products, proper price and regular supply of petroleum for consuming nations. As I've already told you, it has two different sets of objectives. One is to secure a fair price that product and ensure that each country, each member country get a stable return, fair return on their investment. Second, they must ensure a fair price and regular supply of oil to the consuming countries. Now we have completed the discussion regarding Opaque and all the trading blocks. We'll be doing a small case study. It has been come to our notice in the last 20 years that Asean, although it consisted of smaller nations, was more successful than Sac. Asean is one of the major trading blocs in the world, but it represents 420 million people. It's a larger trade bloc than North America and Western Europe. Sac represents almost 25% of the population of the world. But there is a contradiction, an irony between ASEAN and Sac. While ASEAN has become a roaring success, called the Asian Tigers, Sac has been a sheer monumental failure. The reason behind this is given to us. In ASEAN, all the countries are of equal size, almost equal size. The level of economic development is almost equal. Common fear of communist China. They all feared China. All of them had similar economic policies. They all introduced economic liberalization in the 1960s, which further accelerated economic growth, particularly Singapore and all. The way of functioning of ASEAN is based on two principles: consensus and consultations. Mashuyakura and Mufakat. Consensus and consultations. Nobody is given more importance at the expense of the other member. But at the same time, the Sac is more powerful. It constitutes 1/4 of world's population. But still, it's a sheer failure because of the following reasons. In South Asia, India is the largest country. It occupies more than 70% of the area. Other nations feel that strengthening of Sac means empowering India. India is more developed than Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and all. It has more mighty power. But there are serious bilateral disputes between India and Pakistan. Serious. Two major South Asian powers. Serious disputes regarding economics, regarding terrorism. Bilateral disputes and differences exist between India Bangladesh, India Nepal, India Pakistan, Nepal Myanmar and Pakistan Bangladesh. So lots of disputes exist between all these countries. Apart from that, there is a vast degree of difference in economic development of India and other countries. India is far developed than Pakistan and Sri Lanka in terms of technology, in terms of direct investment from outside of India, capital generation, savings, and India is one of the largest economies of the world, not in South Asia alone. Purchasing power of India is much more than these countries and increasing at a rapid rate. GDP of India is recording a growth of almost 9.5% for the last 15 years. So, which means India is no longer going to be dependent upon South Asian region for its own development. India is a world player, global player. It cannot be bound by Sac commitments. So India did not care much for Sac. So because of that, Sac was a sheer failure. We're coming to discussion of WTO, which is one of the largest organizations of trading blocks. But it's not a block of some countries, it's a block of all the countries of the world almost. There are a number of ways looking at WTO. It's an organization for liberalizing trade all over the world. It's a forum for governments to negotiate trade agreements. It's a place for them to settle trade disputes. It operates a system of trade rules. It has given away with the quota system. It has ended protectionism on the part of some countries. We'll discuss WTO later. It's not possible for a country to produce everything that it needs or desires to consume. Different countries produce different goods and services than they exchange. There's goods and services among them. So if a country has surplus goods and products, it must trade its surplus products, surplus GDP to other countries. So that is why it requires the cooperation among some members. So the trading blocks are a manifestation of the regional approach, regional requirement of some of the countries to make trade possible between them. Formation of trade at global level is very important for international trade. They augment in a fierce manner the surplus trade that can bring prosperity to your own nation, bring valuable foreign exchange, and also at the same time help other countries getting more technology, getting goods which they are not in a position to produce. We will be continuing our discussion when we take up WTO and GATT. I hope you understood the concept of trading block, which we generally discussed. You can take the source from the internet regarding the requirement of new data, so you can come up with new findings regarding these trade blocks. I hope you do that and be more satisfied. Till then, till we start a new session, thank you very much.